Okay, so today's show will be to fully explain how to water the plants. The plants and when the fruit comes and everything. So I'll show that quickly today, how to do that and in how much amounts. Now the amount depends on the size of the plant. Let's say this plant is about 2 meters big, then one would need 1.5 liters, so to speak. Well, 1 liter of water is enough per watering, but 1.5 liters. But to explain, this is not water. This is carbon atoms. It has liquid in it and water, but enriched water. So that's a lot better water than the one before. And now I'll explain quickly how to water when one is doing fruit itself, like I showed in the past video that started to give fruit and everything. So this now is the greens from my plants. This is enriched honey. It's enriched cactus atoms. It's enriched, some of them even had milk. It's enriched tomatoes. I used to water tomatoes like that and make the greens out of them because I watered it with tomatoes. So this has enriched honey in it, it has enriched tomatoes in it, it has a lot of enriched atoms and a lot of enriched liquid water in them and everything. These are now a few days dry, but they're still good and everything. But it is best once one cuts away the let's say one whole leaf, he takes it and whizzes it immediately after that, because the atoms are then richest and fullest. So now I'll explain that process, how to do it, all of it, for one plant, one watering. So this is, I'll show it in smaller amounts now, just to do it faster and everything. So I take the greens for my plants, which is mostly leaves, enriched honey, enriched cactus, enriched many things that I showed. Enriched, which is even more important, enriched tomatoes, and that's what these greens are. So I go about that much. I would go more greens depending on the size of the plant, but now I'll just show that whole process, how it goes. So if it's let's say a smaller plant, then you go smaller water. If it's a bigger plant, then you go bigger water. But this water counts as water still, so I'll show that how it goes. So I'm going to show the greens first, then the tomatoes and the other stuff, and then it's combined in the bottle, and then it's all poured into the plant. Okay, so the blender and the weeds were in for about 2-3 minutes, and this is what one is left with. This is now highly thick green enriched plant with water. I will show just the greens how it goes, but then it doesn't really flow that much if it doesn't have water in it. Therefore not a lot of it would go down, a lot of it will stay on top, like here the carbon. Now this is individual carbon atoms, the foam, and that's exactly what we are looking for, to get as much this into the roots. This is highly now enriched honey, enriched tomatoes, enriched cactus, enriched plants. All that is now in here. One could use honey if he doesn't have yet these enriched ones, but that's the big deal about making the whole plant enriched, because then you have a supply of enriched carbon atoms and enriched water, enriched honey, enriched. It's all in the plant when you make the plant out of tomatoes, out of honey and everything. And then you water the fruits with them, and then the fruit is even more enriched. So these are now, let's say, 2 times enriched honey, tomatoes and so on. So a lot better than using ordinary tomatoes and everything. So that's what one gets to see. One can see that's now what I'm gonna water the plant with when it's growing tomatoes themselves. I watered one yesterday, the first ones that started, that I showed in the videos. There's 8 of them, and they doubled in size already. So the tomatoes were like very little, and they doubled in like 12 hours. And I'll show that progress, all of them, how that's going and everything. So this is what one is left with right there. The green water, highly enriched. This is probably now extremely great stuff that tomatoes will be made of. Enriched honey, enriched tomatoes and everything. So the tomato, the fruit will be tomatoes 3 times enriched already. That's how a person skips all those things. But yeah, the enrichment of a tomato is a lot better than the plant, the greens, but because it is a fruit, not just a plant, but it is still better. And that's, I watered the plants with honey, with tomatoes, with them, like I showed in the blender, and then I water the plants with that. And then I have a big amount of greens that are highly enriched atoms, and then I water the plant with those. So this is now with the water greens. Now I'll show greens, how they are blended, and what one gets just the greens. So no water in it whatsoever, to be highly enriched, just that stuff. Okay, so now a little bit of water I put in just so that the blender picks it all up and everything, but it's mostly greens. And now I'll show, just in case somebody doesn't know how to do that. One has this and this, just what to pour the stuff through, and then one just pours it into the bottle, which is not that complex, but to show, because these big parts that are left, they would just stay there on the top. That's good too, because this is greens, and it would just go dry, so it would not even mess up the plant when it's outside. One would just take all of this and pour it in, and that's that. But on the inside it would go bad, this and that, so it's not really necessary anymore. So now a person can see on top is now it's the foam. So it's just all poured in. Because the liquid that's going down, that's what's going to go into the roots. All these big parts, they don't really go into the root because they are too big. And that's poured in. Now I'm doing a little amount just so to speed it up so people can see. And this is what a person is left with on top. But this stuff is too big. To put it there, it's okay. The water will pick up time through time some of these atoms and take them into the plant anyway. But I'm gonna use this and whiz it again, just so that I don't throw it away. So you don't have to put it where the plant is, like on the ground, but it's better to whiz it again and then do it. Because there it'll just take up space and everything. But the best thing about it is that when it's whizzed, the process is speeding up. That's what all farmers do. They take greens that are dry and they put it there next to the plant, and that's it. Then rain falls, water falls, and picks up tiny little atoms, but picks them up like grams per year or something. This here now is 1,000 times faster and better because I just made a liquid. There's the foam on top that will actually go into the root today. That fast, that rich, because it speeds up the whole process. Some girls say, and some people, you take eggshell, you put them there, that's good. Or the whole egg, you put them there, and that's good. But to whiz the egg is a lot faster and better, 1,000 times better than you just put it in the ground and it sits there. Other parts, and how to do when you water just a plant, when it doesn't have fruit. So you take a blender, and this is 3 cherry tomatoes. These are like some Italian ones, okay ones, but it's best to find organic ones. So not ones in the store, because that's probably made from waste and from something that ain't that healthy and so on. But you can use those as well. If you can't afford some better ones or anything, then any tomato is okay. It's still tomato atoms, and it has that enrichment in part in it. Just the question is what it was made out of. So now I'll show that. So I'll go 3 tomatoes, the day. So if you're watering a plant, you would just take honey, pour in about half of this honey. The problem with honey is if it's too much used on plants, it might clog up the ground, and then water has trouble going through the ground and into the roots because honey is sticky and so on. So honey could be used, let's say, about 100 grams to 200 grams, depending on the size of the plants, per day, and one could do it, let's say, 5 days. 5 days in a row, 7 days in a row, and then that's it. Not to do it anymore on that one plant, because it might clog up the ground, and then the ground will be too sticky, and then the roots won't get as much water as they would. So honey is very good, but to use in little amounts every, let's say, 3 months. So one would do, like, let's say, this half. This is about a liter. This much honey per every 2 months, let's say. So that's sort of okay. But that's when it's on the inside. If it's outside, then of course a lot bigger amounts are used because the roots are a lot, they spread a lot more and everything. So the cherry is in, the water goes in, but that was an explanation, and the greens as well. If a plant is being watered, then with greens the plant will be even more enriched and so on. But even when one waters the plant, some of this goes into the tomatoes themselves. Other parts still go into the plant and enrich it as well, and so on. So I'm just going tomatoes now. I'm not going honey. Honey would be a very good idea to be in tomatoes as well, but I already use honey on the plant because of the ground. I can't really go honey now because it'll become too sticky and not so good about that. So I'll just go the greens that already have enriched honey, a lot of it in it, and the tomatoes. And these tomatoes, some people have blossom and rot. Some go bad, they need potassium. Now a banana peel would be very good to put in this as well. The peel of a banana, one whole one, would also go into this. That has potassium, that has the stuff that the tomatoes need to stay healthy, don't go blossom and rot, to rot away and so on. Plus another very good thing to point out about all of this, the enriched atoms, they cannot go bad as fast as the ordinary tomatoes. Tomatoes go bad because they're made out of ground or fertilizers that people ordinarily use, and then tomatoes go bad because that's not really that good, because the atoms aren't that really strong and everything. But these atoms are extremely strong, so that ensures that the tomatoes will not go bad and everything. So now I'll just show that process, how to go when you're watering the whole fruit and everything. So how to make these greens, I didn't mention that fully. How to make the greens of the enriched honey, of enriched atoms and everything, that's not really that easy. One has to know chemistry, has to know quantum realm physics and so on. These are just quantum entangled carbon atoms and water in them. They're like a sort of quantum entangled green bag, but water can flow through them. So in some videos I explained quantum entanglement of atoms. So these are quantum entangled carbon atoms and some other ones, and water is like in between them flowing and so on. When you have, let's say, a leaf that is sort of like dry, like let's say these yellow ones, then that is because there is not enough liquid in it. So these are maybe something oily, too much hydrogen in them, and then the water can't really flow through. They're too sticky. So if you use something that's, let's say, too much oily, too much sticky, I tried on some plants that, then the water can't really fit there and everything. But I'll explain that in future shows, of course. But it's highly complex. It's not that easy to make enriched honey, enriched everything, and not to mess up the whole process and everything. But that's what they really are. These just stood a few days because I had to, because now I have flowers and everything, and then I had to cut them off and everything so that the flowers and fruit start. So this is what one gets from just cherry tomatoes and just water. And there it is right there. So it's like a yellow, it's like a red liquid, and that's what it is. So all the potassium, everything that these tomatoes were made out of, these are some Italian ones, so probably good and quality ones, not bad ones because they're Italian, but that's what one gets. And to water a plant with this, now the fruit that's gonna come will be made out of these atoms, these and the green ones, they'll be combined. Now a little banana would also be very good here. A banana peel or a whole banana would be put in here and whizzed as well, and that is good too. So to point out that because tomatoes need calcium that's in a banana, potassium, sorry, and then they will not go blossom and rot if somebody has those problems. But this is highly enriched, so no way could there be blossom and rot. But when tomatoes are watered, it's about every 5 days. They're not supposed to be too much watered or too little, so there has to be a right time. So when a person sees that the ground on top is dry for about a centimeter, about an inch, then it's time to water, so to speak. 2-3 inches even if it's dry on top, but that's, if the roots are on top, that's too much then. So when there's about an inch of dry land on top, one just puts a finger in and sees, then it's about time to water. Then nature shows that and everything. So now this is just poured into this, and then that's done and everything. So this is all that I was left with on top from the tomatoes. It's now just the little red part and just some seeds right there. Seeds are tougher entangled atoms, so they're harder to break by the blender. And that's what is left, and now all of it is in the water. So the tomatoes very well turn into a liquid because most of it is liquid then. So, and there it is. Now in the bottle there is the greens and there is the tomatoes. A little bit of banana would have been okay too. And then it's finished. Now this is just poured into the plant when it has fruit, and then the fruit is made out of these highly enriched atoms. To make enriched honey and everything is it's not that easy. It's a little bit complex and everything, and all the other parts, but it will be shown and explained also in videos and everything. So now this is just poured in, and that's that, and that makes the highly enriched tomatoes and everything. So people saw these tomatoes in earlier videos right there, and people can see right there how much they grew in just 2 days. The video was 2 days ago, and what I just showed, that's what I watered them with. Highly enriched atoms that are from these plants. I would just cut off some of their leaves, I would cut them off, and then that's what I watered the plant with, because the leaves and the whole plant I made highly enriched and everything. And right there people can see how much they grew in just 2 days. And these right here grew also. They were like a green flower. I couldn't even see the tomatoes yesterday, so in 12 hours now I can see the tomatoes and everything. So they doubled in size in just about 2 days, in just 12 hours, sorry, these two. And right there are ones that are growing nicely and everything else. So that's what I watered them with. So that's the ground right there as it is watered. People can see and everything. It's wet and so on. This is now one next to it which is dry. So when people see that it's dry about a centimeter, although under it's still wet and so on. People can tell by the color of the ground. But when one uses honey, but in right amounts, not too much, it even acts to hold the moisture in the land. So the land remains moist and good for the plant longer and longer. None of the watering gets down there anymore. So when honey is used, it also, but honey has to be whizzed very thoroughly in water for let's say 4 minutes before it is poured in, to make sure that it's a liquid, not a sticky liquid like honey originally is. But it also acts to hold the moisture in the land longer, and then the plant grows better and everything. So when it is like that, the ground sort of darker, that means it's wet. But when it's like this, dry, then that means, and about a centimeter or an inch, it's like that, that means then it's time to pour the things in and water the plant. So those are now the highest enriched atoms on the plants and everything so far. These tomatoes right there. And they are getting big fast and everything. So, but that's easy to understand. Let's say a banana that I mentioned. Banana atoms of a banana, when they go bad, they turn brown, so to speak. The banana peel and the banana inside. So they do not rot away. They are still good to eat and everything. So that just means those atoms have that type of energy in them. They are thicker, and they have that type of chemistry energy in them that doesn't turn bad. And that's why bananas are too good for tomatoes, because simply those atoms are easy to use. And are easy to use, put in the potato, but it's a lot better when it's whizzed in a blender. To point out, that's the genius new way of doing it, than to just put the banana peel in the ground, and that's that. But those atoms do not turn bad, and then they prevent blossom and rot. But honey does that same thing. You can put honey in the ground for 10 years and it'll remain honey. It might just go dry and sort of like turn more into a solid, but it will not go bad anyway. So the enriched honey that I pointed out is even better than the bananas for that purpose, because the atoms are that type of energy that do not spoil and do not go bad. So the whole point is, which atoms is one making the tomatoes out of? But there are a lot of things to point out, because some are healthier, some are better for human beings, and so on and so on. But these are now doing very, very well and turning big fast and everything. Okay, so now I'm in a forest. Thought to show people, some people maybe can't afford, they can't get, tomatoes, honey, use that to water plants, and maybe they have many plants and everything, but there is an easy, cheap way to do things that people don't even need any money for, actually. This is like a small forest next to the coast, next to the Montenegrin coast and everything. It's almost going to be summer soon and everything. So thought to show people what to do if people don't have money, can't really use honey, tomatoes every day to water plants. Then there is a lot of free stuff around that's in the forest and everything. Now, first thing here is like flowers. There are flowers, and there is grass. So the flower is like sort of the fruit, but the grass didn't yet give fruit. Let's say there's a weed right here. People can see it. That there, that's on top, that's not a fruit, of course, but it's more enriched atoms than the weed itself. Also, the weed is sort of the weed is mostly enriched ground. So weed is like table of elements number 2. Enriched ground and water. That's what a weed is. But it's like that part, which is sort of like some type of fruit, or that's some type of flower, that's more enriched than the weed itself. So people can get that. People can get these types of flowers. This is now enriched. This is like, you can even tear it because it's, people can see right there. That's greens, but it's strong. You can tell when you touch it, it's strong, sticking strongly together. That's strong stuff as well. So good atoms to use when plants are made. But if a person can't use tomatoes to water a plant, he can just get these weeds. This stuff, which is supposed to be great, just pick it up. It rots away anyway on any land, people pay for that. You go to some places and cut the weeds and grass, they even pay you for that. But you can use that then and everything. Now these Adams right here are very good. This is like a tree that grows during the summer. So this is like sort of tree that would grow in Canada. That type of greens right there. So this is like sort of like a Christmas tree, so to speak, that type of tree. So these greens are also very good to get when the plant is being made. One could, if one, let's say, makes a fruit out of these, well, that is and if somebody's making extremely cold places, then this type of Christmas tree, like tree, the greens from it are very good for that and everything and so on. Now there is a lot of stuff around that one can use. See, all those trees there are actually trees that grow during the summer and during the winter. So all those greens right there that are free, you can use, and it'll prevent blossom and rot and all those things on a tomato, on any vegetable plant, for and everything. Now, what type of taste will it be? Is these Adams, they are very good for those purposes. So let's say people in cold places, they can just take Christmas trees and those types of things, just the Adams of it are very, very good, very good to make plants out of in the winter and the fruit out of it. Okay, so now I'll show people an example of also that is the best about how to water plants and everything. I got a banana. Now many people know, and people hear from farmers, that bananas are great for tomatoes, to water tomatoes. But the reason is, I'll show that first, is these green parts, these dark parts right there, which are sort of brown dark. And the reason why that is because even if it spoils a banana, that's because of hot temperature most likely. The atoms turn dark. Temperature changes the chemistry inside an atom. A hot atom is like blown up, like a balloon blows up, expands. A cold atom sticks together, like shrinks and sticks together. So these turned hot, and then they change chemistry, and then they change color. That's the easy explanation. Like an equation, temperature equals mass times the color one gets. So the temperature changes the color of the atoms because they expand. And when they expand, they change color then. And they change the relationship to each other inside the banana. So, just like that is... So that's the easy way to understand it. But other fruits, they change their chemistry, not dark and still good to eat, but they change into something that spoils and smells bad and stinks and everything, and then it cannot be used, cannot be eaten. But bananas, no. So that's the only reason why a banana is good for tomatoes, because these atoms prevent the tomato from rotting away and everything. So, but what farmers did, the same way penicillin is made, people know, from bread, from fruit, same way a penicillin atom blows up, like expands, and then it turns into penicillin. Same thing exactly, just a different type of fruit and everything. But what people did, they would take this peel of a banana and put it in the ground, and that's that. So now I'll explain a way better way to do that and everything, which is the best way how to water plants. What I showed so far with the plants and with the everything, that's the best way to water plants and everything. These plants are made already out of enriched atoms, out of honey, out of tomatoes, out of chilies, out of many things, out of cactuses, out of things from a forest that I mentioned. All these plants were made out of these things, some more, some less, some different, and so on. But now I'll explain a very easy explanation about that, how to do that. So farmers would say, you take a peel, you put this in the ground, and that's that. But there's 1,000 times better way and 1,000 times better way to enrich your plants and the food you eat, which is healthier for you, for your family and everything. So now I'll show examples of that. I'll take these parts and I'll put this in the blender. And this. But these two I'll just leave in water as an example to show what really happens when people do that for plants and everything. So now the banana is there, the water goes in. That's just a little too much. It's just an example, so I'm not really going to use this. And there it is. So. Just this one time so people see what happens. But banana whizzes fast, so it's not. Okay, so I'm not going to use this, it's just to explain and show. So there's now the water with the banana that has tons of individual carbon atoms of the banana in the water. So all of this will go into the root as one pours it in. Right there is a foam, which people can see, white foam. That's all individual carbon atoms that are leaving from the pot. So that means they are individual and they will all go into the roots. Because when one whizzes in a blender, they all have to be individual carbon atoms with the water. And that's what's going in the root. And when one sees a lot of foam like that, that's all individual carbon atoms. And this is very thick. This shows that banana is very, very good for this. Very, very good atoms and everything. But this is potassium, this is a whole lot of things in it. This has even rock, it has a lot of atoms in the banana that are good because bananas are made in tropical places and hot places, and the ground there has to be sort of like a desert, not like a desert, but has to have the right chemicals in it and everything for the banana to work. But this is showing that banana is actually very good for this process. See, so this is what a person can put in the plants that is extremely good for tomatoes. But honey is even better, I would say. See, so that's what you got. Now this is what the farmers say to do. You take a banana peel and you put it in water. So right now, maybe there's like 1 gram of atoms of the banana in the water, not even that much. And it will take years and years for this to break down to be any good for the plant. See, so that's why this in a blender making things for the plants is so good, because there's a 1/2 kilogram water and bananas that will go into the root right away. Just as I poured that, let's say, in the plant, all those atoms are going in the plant of the banana, which will enrich it, and the tomato, make it not rot away, and so on. But this is what people do. They put a banana, then they water a banana peel in the ground, they water it, and that's it. And they say it's like good. But this is a very slow process, not really that good. And the water is very clear. So it's not really, it helps out, but like a tiny little bit. So that's just to show how blending is like 1,000 times better, and pour that in the plant and everything. And the banana seems to be very good even for this. This is the first time I tried a banana, because my tomatoes are like, tomato plants are doing great. Nothing's wrong with them and so on, and the fruit just started these days, so So they didn't really need that. So, but I just realized that it's very, very good for that. So there people can know if your tomatoes have rot on them, like they're rotting away before you get to eat them. That's what you do. You just blend the whole banana with the water and you water the plant with that. And your tomatoes will be great. But you can do that with honey. You can do that with some other animals that don't change. You can even find greens in a forest somewhere that are living in cold, living in hot time. That means those atoms too are very, very strong and the temperature doesn't change them. So they do, if one person can't afford bananas to do that every day, well, he can just find those types of greens that are free and he can do that. So this is the trees that I'm doing, and this is the biggest one. I call it like the dinosaur tree, this one, because this is all natural, 100% natural, growing the way it was designed naturally and so on. So nothing to be cut off, nothing to be altered and so on and so on, but made out of highly enriched and rich stuff. This plant is made out of cactuses when it was young, because cactuses are very, very good atoms that can hold out in the winter, because I started in the winter to make it. This is like over 3 meters is this plant now. Plus it has suckers, some are 2 meters. There is 2 of them that are like 2 meters. Down there, there are suckers that are meter and something. 2 of them are over 2 meters, around 2 meters long. And they have flowers right there working and everything. But the main branch is right there. And it has started with flowers and everything. So this is like a natural, the best one best one here of all the projects and everything. And I tied it this way to be like a vine. To be like a vine, and now it's gonna go to the sides like that and everything. But what I thought to show was this right here. This is, it seems, the first tomato on it. I cannot yet see, is there a tomato in it? I fertilized these, all of them, like yesterday, and I think that's a tomato right there, the first one on the dinosaur tree and everything. But overall the tree is doing well. I had a little crack right there that happened accidentally, but that's okay. It's surviving and it's okay and everything. So, and the dinosaur tree that has no flaws on it. I can show people. Farmers say, you know, you gotta cut off the suckers, yada yada yada. But that's interesting to point out. When one waters a plant with honey, with bananas, with tomatoes, and so on, cactuses, then the plant has tons of energy. And it can grow naturally and give fruit and everything. This plant right there, right now has over 150 flowers on it. Some are smaller, like let's say right there. But they are starting as well, but some are bigger. Some are bigger and starting to be tomatoes, like right there and so on. And there's many flowers going in everywhere, like also right here. And down there are sort of smaller ones and everything. But these are all flowers on a sucker. This is a sucker that starts right like there, at the very bottom. And it goes up. It goes up, and the flowers are right there on it. So it has started. Some flowers are very, very small, and suckers as well, like right there. But this one too is starting with the flowers. This is a sucker that's like maybe 30 centimeters, but some flowers too are opening up. So what is showing that is that this concept really works and really will give a lot of tomatoes and everything. And people do not have to cut off the suckers if they don't want to, because they will get like 100 times more tomatoes if they don't, than like on this one where the suckers are cut off and everything. So now I thought just to show what to do when doing it with honey. So that's the honey down there, people can see at the bottom, but that's how much I use. So maybe there people can see. So it's like in a blender, it's like very, very small. Half a centimeter, maybe not even more than that is supposed to be in. Because if too much honey is in, it'll clog up the root system, especially if it's outside. The sun turns honey solid, so not good at all then. So just a little bit of honey is put in when one is watering it. So, but of course it depends how big the plant is, how big the land is and everything. But the honey, one must make sure turns in, mixes with water. So I'll show that fast because it's not really that complex, but the honey is the rich stuff, the good stuff that makes strong plants and healthy fruit and everything. When you're doing it, I'm doing it now just to show. You go water all the way up to there. So all of it, how much water you're doing in, you use that much honey, half a centimeter, even smaller, depending on how big the plant is you're watering with and everything, and that's that. And this is now what you get. So this is now a liquid. Now people can see there's no more honey that's solid. So a person has to make sure when he pours it in, that's what these are for. When you pour it in, you pour it into 2 of these. And then you water the plant. Or if it's something solid, you pour it there and then you squeeze these just to get everything out faster and everything. And then you know that the stuff going to the plant is a liquid, plus that it's not stuff that's gonna clog up the root system and everything. And now honey is a liquid. People can tell right there that it's a liquid. It's no longer, you know, too sticky and so on. The foam on top, that's all honey right there. And people can see that. Now it's actually, it smells like honey, and it smells like honey a lot. But it's a liquid, it goes into the roots, and that's that. Very simple. Just do not use too much honey, because then that might mess things up. Now I thought to show a video about how people do farming. This is the part of the show to compare how the difference is between doing it this way, blending a whole lot of things and making atoms that go fully 100% with water into the plant, compared to other farming. This is a girl, she's somebody who seems very smart, knows a lot about farming, and has a very big garden, very, very good stuff, a lot of tomatoes and everything. So I thought to show this video of her, or how she does it, and to explain the whole process, how it goes and everything. And how other people do it, and how it is done in a new way, which is totally new and better and a lot healthier and everything.
Let's talk about some of the things that can go wrong with your tomato plants. I did tell you that I'm going to be honest about my garden, so I'm going to show you some things that I see right now that are problems. As you can see, I am shooting a YouTube video instead of freaking out about these things, so clearly I'm not that worried about it. One of the things that you see is leaf curl. This just means your plant is stressed. In this case, my plants need to be watered. We have had very, very hot days. I did not water yesterday because we had just gotten rain, but I will.
Now, this leaf stress happens, but that's no problem. That is probably because of temperature, or some things came into the leaf that changed the chemistry of it, or the internal temperature or in the quantum realm of the leaf. It could be because of internal temperature, which is in the atoms. Sometimes somebody might water some plant with something, and then that happens. The atoms come into the leaves, the new ones, and the internal quantum realm temperature of the leaves changes. or it's because of outside temperature, but that's nothing to worry about. If that happens, then you can see that on the leaves, what you're watering with ain't really that good or something. But then you just change it, water with good things, and then that will just go away. It'll return to being looking better leaves like these and so on. This is a chili probably right there. Those are tomatoes. And these are very big, it seems, tomatoes, very good ones. I mean, in the old ways, how that is, they look big and everything. One more thing to point out, when people water tomatoes with, let's say, honey, with enriched atoms that I explained, with, let's say, eggs are also extremely good to do everything. Turkey eggs, chicken eggs, duck eggs. The duck eggs and turkey eggs are a lot better, and so on. If somebody can find snake eggs, alligator eggs, crocodile eggs, they're like even better, a lot than even those. But to point out this is nothing to worry about. If it happens to somebody, that just means that the internal temperature of the leaf in the quantum realm has changed, and so on. Let's say, the greens that I pointed out earlier in the video that are like growing in Canada, on trees in Canada, well, they are tough, strong. If your leaves are made out of them, then this can't even happen to them, and so on. So that's like some little problem that happens, but it's nothing to worry about, easily fixed and so on.
Water in the morning, so I'm not freaking out about it right now. Some of them are not stressed out, but some of them are really starting to show some signs of stress, but it's okay. There are all kinds of issues that come in the form of wilts and spots, as you can see here. Now, I really don't have time today to go into this in depth. So I will tell you that there is a little bit of that that's going to be a little bit normal, but you always want to keep an eye out for plants that are wilting or showing a lot of spotting, because a lot of times you can catch blight early on. But really, there are a lot of pictures online, and anytime that I've had stuff like that come up, you know, I've searched, I've looked through it, you can't always troubleshoot it, but I am going to tell you a couple things that you can do to try to keep your plants healthy. One of the very important factors in the health of your tomato plants is spacing, and the second is pruning. Now, the big thing that tomato plants need is they need to not be left moist, and they need airflow, which, you know, if you're getting a lot of rain, then a lot of times if there's not airflow, it can harbor a lot of moisture. That's where bacteria comes in, and you get sick plants. A wilt or a blight can knock your tomato plants out really fast, so airflow is very important. Last year I planted my plants way too close together, and I did not prune them, and I lost all my tomato plants pretty early on in the season. However, you can see this year we've got them spaced out 24 inches apart, which is still fairly close together, but we have pruned heavily. You can see all the lower branches have been snipped off, and this particular plant is pruned to 2 main vines here, and that has made a world of difference in the health of these plants. Another thing is, you do not want to water your tomato plants from overhead. Because of the fact that they're so susceptible to funguses and blights, that is just asking for trouble. Now, obviously, it's going to rain. You want it to rain, and you can't control that. However, be aware after you get a heavy rain to come out, make sure there's airflow, you know, prune out some branches if you need to. So after the rain is when the blight is the most likely to set in. If you're watering your plants, do it from the bottom. Soaker hoses are your friends with tomatoes. If you're going to water, come through and water along the bottom of the plant to try to avoid a bunch of water splashing up or coming down from overhead. Mulching is also very important with tomatoes because it keeps water and any sort of splashback from happening when it does rain or when your plants are big.
So this is now a good idea. Yeah, one should water right there, not on top, because the leaves might change. But also there to point out, when a plant is made out of enriched leaves, like from a forest or from tomatoes, eggs, honey, and good things, then they are extremely strong and resilient to going bad, to many of these things she mentioned. If there is a yellow leaf, like she just mentioned, well, that means that inside there the temperature might change it, but also it means that it's made out of atoms. Where a leaf is yellow, there are maybe too much oil, too much hydrogen. Maybe the water that she waters it with, in the hydrogen atoms of the water, there is some type of chemistry there that's not really that good to become a plant. Many people water their plants with water that's from a faucet, so that has things in it that to preserve it and so on, and then those yellow spots come usually from that. But if yellow spots and yellow leaves happen on the bottom, that really does happen. That happens to me on my plants too, but I just cut them off. But as people saw on the dinosaur tree, I cut off like there maybe 3 leaves that were sort of little bit yellow. I just cut them off so that that doesn't spread, but although it can't anyway. But to other people it happens more and more and everything, so they cut off these lower parts so that that doesn't happen and that it doesn't move up to the tomatoes. That's one thing to point out. Another, she has straws right there, and that that forbids too much sunlight to go into the ground to dry it. But there, what I pointed out, honey keeps the land moist like very long, but in small amounts, like I explained. Too much honey would clog up the whole root system and no water can get in there. So the honey has to be whizzed. But it's a liquid, so it's whizzed very fast. But the honey also keeps the ground moist and makes sure that the water is there where the roots are. Because the honey goes so far and then many atoms stay there. And then they go in for like 4 days, 5 days, they go into the roots. Because honey is individual atoms, but they're like expanded, like blown up, like big atoms, very rich and everything. So there she's using straws to keep the ground moist so that it doesn't go dry fast because of sunlight. That's also a good idea too, and to show. So just to explain that part, yellow leaves, if they happen, one just cuts them off. It's no problem. But when leaves are made out of enriched things, like I showed the dinosaur tree, well, there people can just observe. People can see that if a tree is made out of enriched atoms, that means that it's not going to go bad or anything and so on. So it preserves the plant to be taller and bigger and more resilient to all the things that change it. Temperature and so on and so on.
Rainwater, it helps keep this lower area of the plants dry, which is the area that is most susceptible to blight. Lower branches are pretty much always going to get sick on a tomato plant. As you can see here, I've got a couple that are hanging down and they're starting to wilt. These are it's just pretty typical. Here's a branch that fell. I'll tie that back up.
So, right there. So that's what happens. That it's yellow. Then it turns darker and goes bad. So, but the way that happens on this is that sort of hydrogen. One would assume that the hydrogen right there wasn't really all that good. But if this is because it's too close to the ground, that happens to all plants. Okay, but on mine, it's like tiny little yellow lines. That's all that happens to the leaves that are next to the ground and everything. That's just something probably because the ground has outgoing things. Outgoing masses of earth, and outgoing things carry things out of the land. So that's probably because of evaporation of the land. So the leaves right there are sort of in some evaporation that has that type of effect on it. So that means it's too much moisture, one could say. It's probably that, because moisture is coming out from the ground and everything. So it changes temperature and so on and so on. And it turns yellow, but that's okay. That's just a few leaves that are down there. One cuts them off and nothing bad happens, and so on. Also, what she said about airflow, that is smart to cut off some of the parts down there and then let air come in and airflow for the tomatoes and everything. That's also smart to point out. I mean, this is the girl that I watch and some other shows when I need information about tomatoes and everything. I mostly study physics, technologies, yada. But on farming, I'm just starting, a few months, maybe half a year to work on it and everything. Since I broke down, I write books, science books and so on. technologies to go to space patents and so on. Farming, I came to that idea to make enriched food, to enrich food through nuclear physics. In many videos I explained some of it through nuclear physics and everything. So that was the idea that I came to in writing, and it has shown that it works and everything to me, and I'm working on it and everything. But this is like how I pick up information on YouTube. YouTube is very, very smart thing, very great thing. You know, any type of information anybody needs, he can just pick it up on YouTube. My favorite thing on the whole internet is actually YouTube. But the things I usually watch is technologies, space technologies, so on and so on. What's currently going on in the world of technology, science, and everything. But this is just to show. Those leaves change, they turn yellow, that means that the water is no longer going there. In those yellow leaves and in these brown leaves, when one waters the plant, no water gets there. So that means the atoms, they swell up, that means they're alive, but they're turning bad. So that means they expand, swell up, and they change color. Change of color is change of temperature. Temperature equals mass times the color of the matter one sees. So that's very easily explained through that equation that I also wrote in some books many years ago. So when people see change of color, that's change of temperature basically in the quantum realm in physics. But that means that the atoms are blown up and no water can get in there anymore. Like if this is two atoms, well they expand that they're like that. And then water cannot go through. And then it turns yellow, turns like that. But that's no big deal. Somebody just cuts it off and that's all there is to it. Because that does really happen to leaves when they are near the ground.
But as you can see, the parts that were hanging down started to wilt, wilt, wilt. This is why you see so much of the bottom of my plants is just completely pruned. That is the best way to keep your plants healthy. There's also just the reality that some varieties are just more prone to sickness than others. You learn that after growing them, and that's why you end up with favorites. Brandywines are actually one of the most popular tomato varieties. They have a huge following, people love them, and they're
now people can see there, these tomatoes, they're giving fruit right there. These are maybe over a meter, so to speak. They're a meter and something right there, and they're already giving fruit and everything. But as people saw, the ones I'm making, they are like, the biggest one is over 3 meters long, you know. But maybe this is a different variety or something. So for people who are looking to make big plants, I have a plan on these to make vines, and some of them I plan even that they go over 10 meters. The world record was 10 meters, so the dinosaur tree I'm planning to be the biggest one ever, like in the Guinness Book World of Records. And in September, that will also be in future shows, in September, if it reaches really 12, 13 meters, then it's a Guinness World Record and everything. But so to point that out, if people are looking for huge tomatoes that go up a few stories high, then you go the most enriched things into your tomatoes that I've been doing. You go cactus, you go eggs, you go honey, all the time when you're watering it and everything. But the big problem with tomatoes is they have to be in the ground. So whatever you water it with, a small percentage will still be ground. But that's not really a problem that much. Some type of ground could be found that is sort of like more sticks to itself and allows other things to flow into the roots. But all ground is chemically sticking together. That's why things grow from the ground anyway, because the ground is chemically sticking together. Plants can grow from desert, from rock, from greens, from many things that I explained in some shows. But tomato has to be in the ground, so whatever one waters it with, a small percentage will still be ground. And the ground is just atoms that are chemically sticking to each other, not quantum entangled, solid to each other, but chemically sticking to each other. And that's why things grow from the ground. And the only reason why fertilizers, animal waste, are any good for plants is because they too are chemically sticking together. But like I showed in the show about the table of elements of carbon atoms, the waste of animals is, which the ones people use, I mean, is mainly from plants. So those waste atoms are like half an atom. They're like in between grass and in between the ground. So between 0 and 1 is the waste that people use, and that's not really that good. Honey is like 5 times bigger atom, healthier, stronger, doesn't rot, doesn't go bad, like a lot, tons better, and everything. But who doesn't have money can just go in a forest and find things. Honey is expensive, but it's used in small amounts, so it doesn't really add up to a lot of money.
Notoriously hard to keep healthy. I've got a couple brainy ones down on the end. They're already starting to show some blight. I might have to pull them out halfway through the season, but I like them, so I grow them anyway. You just tend to learn those things. Sometimes you can find descriptions when you're buying your seeds. People will say, you know, this was really resilient. I didn't get any sickness out of it. And the other thing is that it's also going to vary so much by your climate. I can tell you one of my favorite tomatoes to grow is Dr. Witchy's Yellow. This thing is a beast. It grows big, beautiful fruits. This one's pretty cat-based. I'll tell you what that means in a second. But I don't deal with a lot of blight in these. I don't deal with a lot of wilt. I really like Dr. Witchy. Another one that I'm growing this year for the first time that I'm really enjoying is called Climbing Triple Crop. If you've been watching my videos for a little while, you've heard me say quite a lot about it. I'm starting to get a little bit of coloring on the leaves where I think it might be getting a little yucky, but so far it's produced so many big, healthy fruits that I will continue to grow it again and again. Look at this tomato. It's massive.
Now that's something to show. Now this is a very big tomato, and that's what I'm planning to make too. Tomatoes that are like even bigger than this one. That's the plan, but in future shows we'll all see how big they go. But here to point out, this is probably the breed. Some tomatoes have a gene to grow bigger, some have a gene to grow smaller. Or maybe she's using here some very good stuff to make these tomatoes. She doesn't mention it in the videos. So maybe even that's the reason why they grow big and everything. But let's say a person makes a tomato out of just honey. Well, then it'd be like that. Because honey is an atom that's like a lot bigger probably than what's in these tomatoes. But also, if one uses enriched atoms in food, then they will get tomatoes huge big. So that's very good for profit, for making money and everything like that. So to point that out, that it's also very good for making money if somebody has big farms and so on.
That you might hear or wonder what's going on with your tomatoes whenever you see it. Okay, cat facing. Now this is something that you see that is very typical of heirlooms, and this is caused by fasciated blossom. Fasciated blossoms are essentially where multiple tomato blossoms. Okay, cat facing.
Okay, so this is now a tomato. This is a tomato, looks like a good one. Where you see tomatoes that are half green, half yellow, half red, that's a tasty tomato, very good. So like I said, she has very good tomatoes. And this is who I watch when I need information and so on, amongst others. But here to point out is this tomato has changed color because this is its outside part. A tomato is designed to keep the moisture and the healthy stuff on the inside. But this layer outside, that's something like a natural plastic, if you like. Like a natural plastic that protects the inside from the outside temperatures and so on. And outside many things. Because outside the things would make the inside go bad very fast. So this is like to naturally preserve the tomato. So sort of like some shiny little natural plastic, if you like, or something like that. And these are the parts from the inside that cannot really cope with that. But that's its genetic, that's like the genetic information that made this tomato. It grew that way, that some outside parts were shown some inside parts were shown on the outside. But the inside parts are different type of atoms, so they are used to different type of well, sort of like temperature and different type of environment in the quantum realm. So in the quantum realm, as soon as the outside atoms are exposed, inside atoms are exposed to the outside environment, they change to be dark. And that's the reason why this layer covering is on top of a tomato, to prevent that from happening. Like in its genetic design, how it's designed naturally and so on. And the dinosaur tree, the whole tree is totally naturally growing how it is supposed to grow, like how it was designed, how it was in a forest when dinosaurs were around. That's why I call it, so to speak, a dinosaur tree. So naturally growing totally like how it would naturally grow, as big, as wide, and everything and everything.
This is something that you see that is very typical of heirlooms. And this is caused by fasciated blossom. Fasciated blossoms are essentially where multiple tomato blossoms have fused together to make one kind of super blossom. Now, this could probably be one of the most disappointing things in tomato.
Okay, she mentions that two flowers, they stick together and they create one tomato. So that too causes the inside to turn into the inside part of the tomato to turn into the to turn dark because it's exposed outside. But that's, she says, because two tomatoes two grow as one, so to speak. So that happens.
Tomato growing is seeing a bright red fruit hanging on the vine. Your mouth starts watering and you go pick it and turn it over just to discover it has blossom end rot. Blossom end rot is caused by lack of calcium in your plant. Now, a lot of times that can be a calcium deficiency in the soil, which can be remedied by putting things like eggshells in your soil, but that takes almost a year to break down. Some people suggest putting Tums in your soil as a quick calcium fix in case of emergency. I have tried that this year and I seem to be doing better because this is one of the plants that have...
There. So now she mentioned eggshells. Some farmers say you leave eggshells under your plant and that's good for the plant, you know. But they don't tell, some of them don't understand the physics why it is good to leave it there. And that is very important, smart to know for making fruit. Now this happens because when these outside parts of a tomato were being made, the one behind green, when it was being made, good atoms were being used. It was in the ground, it was in the water, in the watering, and then it was growing good. But when bad atoms, this is just earth right there. Earth wants to return to be earth. There, that's just water and the ground. Nothing good is going in the tomato, and then it turns bad very easily like that, because it's just the ground and water, nothing rich and good in it, and so on. To explain that easily. She also mentioned eggshells, but to leave them in the ground, that's like I explained with the banana, the same thing. Maybe a gram of those atoms will go into the root. Takes years and years for eggshells to break down into atoms so that the water picks them up. So a person just puts in a blender the whole egg, the eggshell, the whole egg, blends it, whizzes it, and you pour it in, and then you got great tomatoes that are made out of atoms of the whole egg. And like I pointed out, snake eggs, alligator eggs, crocodile eggs, duck eggs, geese eggs are very, very good. But if somebody can't find those or something, you can just use ordinary eggs. But you put the whole egg in the blender and whiz it with the shell, and you water the tomatoes, and then your tomatoes will be a lot tastier, a lot healthier, a lot bigger, and a lot better and everything. And this will not happen at all. some people use for that, they try bananas, they try, she now says eggshells and so on, but when you whiz eggshells, it's hard to whiz because you have to whiz them a little bit longer. Then you just put a little bit of water exactly where the blades are and the eggshells. And then they will turn into a liquid very, very fast, easily too. In future shows, I'll explain those things and everything. I have one plant where when I do it just out of eggs and everything. But that's also a smart thing to know, that you put the whole egg in and you do it. She now says some people put eggshells in the ground, but that takes years and years for them to break down. You can do it in a blender in like 5 minutes, and plus tons of it go into your tomatoes and everything.
I've watched them rot that did not get tums, and most of the ones that did get tums seem to be doing well, but that's still anecdotal. I'm not 100% sure. A lot of people argue that the science of that is faulty. Either way, one thing that is agreed upon across the board is that blossom end rot can be caused by overwatering, because it keeps your plant from being able to absorb calcium.
Yeah, okay. Now she says that as well. That is also correct. To overwater your plant is bad even for flowers, and could be even for tomatoes as well. So I sort of mentioned that a little bit. A person should water when he sees at least 1 inch or 2 inches that the ground is dry on top. Now, I do that in pots. It's a lot easier to do this in pots because all the enriched atoms that you are pouring, they stay there and go in the roots. But when you're doing it outside, but okay, tomatoes don't really go that long and everything and so on. But then you just need more of it to pour in. But when a person pours, if there's a tomato, he should pour it under, right there where the biggest amount of roots is, and that's exactly under the vine right there. So, but that is correct too, you know. This girl, what she said, that if somebody overwaters tomatoes, then that's not good, and they're not gonna grow that well and so on, and turn bad and so on. But then the reason for that would be because too much water is going there. But now she's talking about watering with water. The thing I showed from the blender, that's not just water, and I should point that out as well. If a person waters with like 2 liters of water, well, the honey, the egg, and so on, that counts as carbon. Does not count as water. That counts as the ground, so to speak. Counts as carbon. There's calcium, potassium, many things and so on in it that go in. But water is just water, so I should point that out. But now she says that happens because too much water went into these tomatoes. But when you are watering along with all these enriched carbon atoms, well, then they are flowing with the water. And then the tomato is getting all the stuff it needs in one shot, so to speak, in one flow of watering your plant. So it's all then there, and it ensures a healthy and good tomato and everything. But to water tomatoes every 4 days, I would say, is probably correct.
So this is another.
Some are outside, so they might dry faster when it's summer and so on.
I don't have any tomato hornworms to show you because we hunt for ours at night by using a black light, which absolutely does work. However, I can show you here that their damage is pretty recognized. Tomato hornworms can wipe out a plant in just a matter of a day or two. You'll come across a plant and you'll see long areas where the branches are just completely stripped of leaves. The black light tip.
Okay, now that's about bugs and everything, and I didn't really do much research. I'm doing this in a building, so it doesn't have that many bugs. There are worms and so on. It can just be bugs that fly near there. I'm still waiting for the bees, but I fertilized myself with a toothbrush, all my flowers and everything. I'll show that in future videos as well, how to fertilize that, or even in this one, a short version of that. But this is worms now that eat that. Now, I did earlier in some writings think about that, what would stop worms from coming. But people spray the tomato with some unhealthy stuff, and then that's not all that healthy for the plant or for the person who eats it. So I got up an idea about that. Would be like some humming bugs, insects, worms. They have brains, and they probably have ears. They have ears as well. Yeah. So some tiny little pitch like hum, bzz, 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 or the sound of some animal that eats worms could be just put there on a speaker and might make them not come over at all. Or I even thought some type of special Tesla coil that makes electricity come out of it, wireless electricity that's like wireless, and one has wireless electricity. That too could sort of be changed, that affects tiny little bugs because they have very little brains, and that it like hits their brains and they would go away. They would not like to come to that place. So, but didn't do much research on that because I only have worms and bugs here. I went to a forest once and thought to get land from a forest that I thought was good, but the one I bought, a German one, is a lot better. And I brought over sort of like a bag of land up here in the hills from the forest, and there were insects in the land, bugs in the land. I almost infested my whole apartment, so I threw all that away. But as I was going through the land, there was like even those poisonous bugs that could have even poisoned me. So I just threw it away and bought this better German land.
It has been a lifesaver for my garden this year. Even though you see here, I still have a little bit of hornworm damage because we went a couple of days without diligently checking for them. We have been able to avoid most of the crop loss that I have experienced in years past because of hornworm. Another issue you may see on your tomatoes is cracking. Another thing that can be pretty harmless, but...
Now this is too, I have not come to these parts. My tomatoes are still tiny little, but this too shows to me the change of color. Now through physics that I'm explaining and everything, trying to explain, that's very easily understood. See, all this dark right there, that means that the tomatoes are not good at expanding. So that means that's ground. This is good stuff, this is ground. And the ground right there, dark, cannot act as good as these atoms. This is just a different type of atoms in the tomato. That's all that's happening. These are the bad ones and these are the good ones. But they're not really that good compared to mine, but I mean as ordinary tomatoes and everything. But when you are making a tomato out of enriched atoms, honey, enriched honey, and so on, eggs and everything, then that most likely will not even happen. This is probably just the ground where there's no energy in the atoms. There are new atoms that are expanding with. This is just a difference in watering, what she's watering with. When she was watering right there, this was the good stuff. The ground had soil in the soil and stuff that were going in good. But these parts, when it was watered and went into the tomato, they weren't that good. So they cannot act as good as these. So they just turn dark and so on. Which would be a physics explanation, but that's probably just the ground and water. When she was watering, just watering ground and nothing else and so on. She might be using eggshells, she might be using, I mean, I don't know. She doesn't really mention what to water it. She just says she waters with water. But I mean, in my physics, that's totally explained and people can understand easily and so on. But that's too just difference in temperature right there. The dark parts are probably ground and water, and ground is ground. It's supposed to change into the tomato, but the atom simply doesn't have the chemistry and energy in it to turn into a tomato. So it turns into something dark and something else. But that just shows you, this is like trillions of atoms. So one can pick many different ones. If that was honey, that would be like no dark at all. Honey cannot be dark and turn dark. Honey one can leave right in a forest, pour it right there or in the ground, and it will just sort of solidify, turn dry, but it will never go bad, never ever. So that means if honey is in the tomatoes, they can't go bad. It's that simple in physics, I like to point out.
Can also cost you your fruit. because again, this exposes the plant to places that may rot, and also it's not beautiful. Sometimes it can cause places that are inedible. A lot of times, like in this case, it makes for an ugly tomato, but it's completely edible because these areas have scabbed over. Cracking is caused by too much water, or really more specifically, too much water too fast after not enough water. What?
So that's all about, but this is a smart girl. She has good ideas and everything about tomatoes. She said she has 150 different tomatoes and everything. I thought to get many exotic ones and different ones. Got some Italian ones, local ones, and so on. Maybe I got 5, 6 different ones, but she says she has 150. So she's somebody interesting and smart to watch and everything and so on. Okay, so about fertilizing flowers, that's like the important part where the flower will not turn into a tomato unless it's fertilized. And I got an electric toothbrush, that's what I use to fertilize the flowers. Now people can see right there, it's sort of yellow. That's from all the pollen. I got flowers, cucumber ones, tomato ones, chili ones, and the bee goes from all of them and exchanges pollen and vibrates the flowers, and that's it. They turn into tomatoes. You know, farmers say it's like there's a male part and a female part of the flower, but that's not really that correct, you know. It's more like, you know, they explain it that way, but it's more like a lesbian thing, you know, than female and male flowers. It's more like a lesbian thing with vibrations and stuff than female and male, but it's easily understood and everything. So the toothbrush is just turned on, it vibrates, and it's put to the flowers. It vibrates the flowers, and that's all that is necessary. Like 5 seconds is enough, like that. Maybe 10 per flower, and that's it. So this side can also be turned to make sure, and the flower is vibrated, and then each one is done like that. And that's about it. Nothing more is needed there or anything. So that's understood. And like 5-10 seconds each flower like that, that's quite enough. For a cucumber, it's more complex because it needs pollen from different flowers to go from one to another, and that's what a bee does. But that's what a toothbrush also can do. One just takes all the flowers. I'll show that fast. That's all the cucumber flowers, and I did them yesterday. There they are, all of them. From there to there, and one just goes from one to another, like there's one right there, and a person goes like that. Then the pollen from that one remains on the toothbrush. Then he goes to the next one and does the same thing on the inside of the flower, and there it is. So that's basically the same thing that a bee does. And that's the same thing you can do with a toothbrush. Just when it's cucumber ones, then all of them have to be done as needed. From one to another. One way and then the way back. And that ensures that the pollen from all of them has been exchanged and went from one to another. So that's easy. One just puts toothbrush, it vibrates about 5 seconds, and that's about that. No, nothing more is necessary. So, and that turns the flower into a tomato, and that's it. Simple. So now a quick explanation about the plants themselves. They're about 3 meters, all of them going 3 meters and so on. So if people want big plants, big yields, and big, even if people want to make money, this is huge on making tomatoes and making them big and making tons of them and so on. So these are big plants. Let's say this one, that's the one I call the dinosaur plant. It has around 200 flowers on it right now. About 20-30 that are blooming already. Some are, some aren't. There is one that's turning into a tomato right now. One is happening. So, but a big run, fast run about how to make them and so on. So this is a plant. These three, although all of them are are made out of, in the beginning they were made out of cactuses and things brought from a forest. Because then I thought to use, and tomatoes, I was using tomatoes then as well. And I was blending them in a blender, whizzing and pouring that in and making the plant grow. And as people can see, they are healthy, doing great and everything. No leaves are bad, the whole plant is green, nothing bad, no diseases, nothing is going on that's bad and so on. As I figured at how it was going in the past. But in the past it was cold. And I thought I'll make it, although it was inside where there's a climate. But I thought tomatoes need to be outside, so they would need actually outside wind temperature and so on. So I was making it out of cactuses. And I was trying to make them get used to the outside temperature, because tomatoes do not grow inside, they have to grow outside. So in the beginning it was cactuses and so on. Then I started using more enriched stuff, eggs and honey and eggshell and so on and so on. And all of those atoms are in these plants. So let's say I would explain that, the whizzing of the green that I showed earlier in the video, I would sometimes drink that. And that's enriched eggs, enriched honey, enriched all of that stuff. And I would drink it, and it gives you energy like you're strong, healthy, you feel great, and you sort of have energy that you are like strong, very, very strong, and you have energy, you feel healthy and full of energy and so on. So sometimes I make it in the morning, but in the morning it's better to drink, because later it's like it maybe isn't. So that would be like something like coffee, but a lot stronger and better, but in a healthy version and everything. But it's better to drink in the morning. So. And this is the one that I call the dinosaur tree. It has about 20 to 30 flowers blooming, like right there and so on. And right here and there on top, that's a sucker that's like over 2 meters long, even more. And that's the main branch where the flowers are growing and everything. And people can see that the plant is totally healthy, totally good, totally green, nothing bad is going on it. Now what she mentioned is down here, that the leaves go bad. So right there's a leaf next to the ground right there. There's a leaf next to the ground right there, and nothing's wrong with it. There is suckers right there. There's a sucker that went up and it's giving flowers already. So none of the leaves are bad, but some actually were. Some actually were, like right there. But that's what happens to my plants. That's all, how much they go bad. One can see right there. But that's because this leaf is made out of honey, made out of eggs, made out of highly rich atoms and so on. But right there was one that was bad, like sort of half of the leaf, so I just cut it away. Didn't really need that. And right there was one as well, and I just cut it. But that was just one leaf. Because this is a natural plant, supposed to grow naturally, so I'm making it grow totally naturally and so on. Now here's the sucker that's maybe 20-30 centimeters, and there are flowers starting there already. There they are, and they are starting, and they will give fruit as well. So there's tons of flowers on this tree, and around 200 of them, and that's how many tomatoes a plant can actually give, if it's done naturally and properly, but also watered with all the good stuff. So people can see, compared to some other tomatoes, this way of making tomatoes is tons and tons better and more profitable than making it the old way, how people do it. She said there that I told that was only ground, because she maybe uses some fertilizer or some waste of animals in the product. So then that's the difference between the ground and the difference between the bad parts of the tomato. But here it's all made out of enriched stuff, and that I pointed out, to be blended and then water the plants with them. So this is the one where I cut off the suckers. That's when I was following the instructions that were on YouTube about about to cut off the suckers, and I only did that on this one plant. And yeah, it gave tomatoes first. They're right there, and these are enriched also, like I pointed out, but still it has a lot less flowers than the other ones, than like that one. And that is the third one that is now growing and giving flowers. That is the third one, but all the suckers except one are on it. One was only cut off and it's right there. All the other ones are there growing and so on, and they are starting flowers and everything, and will give tomatoes and everything. And it's going to the side there, to there, that's its top and everything. So they're all doing good, as people can see. They're green, nothing bad is going on to them. Here I did cut off some on the bottom parts, but right there, and these are all also doing good, close to the ground and everything. That sucker is all the way down, but there's nothing yellow happening and so on. But that does happen to me, maybe to one leaf or two, and that's it. Here there are suckers totally next to the ground, and they're all green, doing very, very good and everything. So that proves that if one waters the plant with enriched atoms, like I pointed out, none of those diseases and those things would happen to a plant and everything and so on. And this one is producing fruit right here. That's like right there next to the ground. There are 2 tomatoes growing already on it, and so on. And that's a sucker about 40 centimeters right there. So, and that's the difference between them. Here the suckers were cut off, but I realized that was a mistake, and it is giving fruit first. Even there are a few tomatoes growing already. They're a little, can't really be seen. They're in these green leaves right there, and there are also all the suckers on, but it's still just flowers, not yet tomatoes. But the dinosaur tree proves right there that a person can manage a big plant. And when it is watered with enriched stuff, that means it will grow naturally and huge, very, very big, and it'll give hundreds more tomatoes than to cut off the suckers and everything. But a person needs to water it with enriched stuff and everything. But if people can't afford that, they can find it in a forest, like I pointed out. Okay, so this is Canada and greens in Canada that I explained. This is footage from Canada actually. And people can see right there that there are greens growing even in Canada where it's very cold and everything. And that is simply because of in those atoms that are green there is a type of energy that the cold cannot change them or destroy them. The tomato plant, the leaf shrinks and changes because of the cold, and some plants because of the chemistry that's in the atoms themselves. But in Canada, that means the ground there is totally different. Therefore, the greens made out of it enrich that ground with a type of energy to make a green that remains green in any cold, -40, -50. So one just takes these greens from Canada's forests and makes plants out of them in Canada and so on, especially in greenhouses and so on, but this is for outside, and then one can make a plant that will survive the winter, and so is the hope which some physics points to and everything. So in the end, just thought to shortly explain that. So there are greens. This is now in the winter and people can see there are greens. So they're similar to a Christmas tree greens, but there are greens. And there, those are like Christmas trees, exactly, right there. So they live, animals live, and so on. So these animals are probably made out of those same atoms like those plants, because they eat wood, they eat grass, they eat greens from trees and everything. So they too are made out of them, and they live nice and fine in Canada and everything. So, but that also says that the ground, the earth in Canada is also different. Here, probably one can see it's all wasteland. Probably because the land right there isn't the one good for making those types of greens and everything. There is some grass and everything, but that sort of points to that the whole world can be changed and turned into a tropical forest and healthy and great for animals and for people to make food and everything. Sort of the physics is pointing to that and explaining that and everything. Because there, that's a green that's growing in Canada in the coldest time when it's -50 and everything. So that simply explains the animals right there are eating are depending on those greens because they eat from the ground, grass and everything. So that shows that the whole world could be done sort of to understand how does that really work in nature and everything and so on. But the simple explanation is that's just the type of chemistry inside the atom that the cold cannot change it or destroy it. So from a quantum realm of view, it's actually very even simple and anything. So a person just takes those greens, waters the plants with them, mixes them in a blender, waters the plants, and they should then work and live fine even in cold areas and so on. So just a quick explanation of that. Of course, it's a totally more complex thing to explain some other time, but that's like in short. One would just take those greens, whiz them, and water plants with them, and they would work just fine. So that's all for today's video, and see you next time. Bye.